Well, it happened when the Israelites to whom he's talking to the people of Israel there. The worst thing, the most threatening and appalling thing that could be said to you would be that the kingdom of God, that's to say, your destiny to rule the world with the Messiah in the coming kingdom, Daniel 7, and given to a people bearing its fruit. Well, the people bearing its fruit are the international church now in 1 Peter, where he says that you, the church, are an international nation to whom the promise of rulership in the kingdom is now given. It was taken away from those who should by right have had it, but they disqualified themselves by rejecting Messiah. And you are a holy nation now. Those things, those terms were applied to Israel in the Old Testament. So that brings us to the famous thing in Exodus 19:6, that you are priests and kings, he said to national Israel. When they failed by not accepting the Messiah, generally, now some did, but as a nation they rejected the Messiah, then God said, all right, I will now open this thing to the Gentiles equally, and they will be the international Israel of God, Galatians 6:16, the true circumcision, the spiritual, not physical circumcision. That's the international church of God, however you define it. They are the holy nation now, who must bear the fruit of that kingdom to receive the gift of the kingdom of God. Fear not, little flock. It's your Father's good pleasure to give you the rulership of the nations with Messiah at the second coming. And certainly, by Romans 11, we know that Gentiles have been grafted in. Gentiles were getting a shot at the gospel in a new way, even in Acts 8, where they went to Samaria. Now, please note that some Gentiles had the privilege of being under the scope of Messiah's teaching. What about the Syrophoenician lady who begged Jesus, right? Despite the fact she wasn't an Israelite. So Jesus made exceptions. And then in Acts 10, the gospel officially went to the Gentiles. That's interesting. Cornelius was a Roman soldier, and a very special event had to occur there to show that now it wasn't just the 10 and 2 tribes, that's the 12 tribes, I'll call them Israelites, from whom the kingdom had been largely taken, but now it was going to go to the Gentiles. And from that time on, of course, it goes equally to Jew and Gentile. Any Jew can accept the gospel. Any Gentile can believe and accept the gospel. One gospel now of the kingdom for everybody. That's the Great Commission. The key here is to define the kingdom of God correctly and belief in the death and resurrection of Jesus. Both those things. So I'm against the Billy Graham idea, with great respect to Billy Graham, when he says that the gospel is Jesus doing 3 days' work. I don't think that's right. What was Jesus doing for 3.5 years teaching? Preaching the gospel of the kingdom. Only in Matthew 16:21 did he for the first time begin to talk about his death. So once you latch on to this idea that I said to the students over the years, the devil only has one trick. That one trick is to separate Jesus from his teaching. Then you've got another Jesus. You can accept Jesus in some vague way, but if you haven't accepted his word of the kingdom gospel, you haven't accepted him. You cannot accept a person without accepting what he says, because your words are who you are. So the words, gospel, truth, gospel of the grace of God in Acts 20, verses 24 and 25, just put those two together for yourself and enjoy this experience. Acts 20, Paul, summarizing his own ministry, says, I went about preaching the gospel of the grace of God. And I've heard people stop right there. In the very next verse, he defined what the gospel of the grace of God is. It was heralding the gospel of the kingdom. It's very gracious of God to give you world rulership along with Jesus. That's a gracious gospel, but it's the gospel of the kingdom, and the devil does not like those words, apparently, about the kingdom. So you must work even harder to get that truth over based on Mark 1:14.